So.
Good then.
And we're back.
Are all the cameras on? Oh, is everything on?
Yes.
Oh. You won film.
I think our director is saying we should get started. You can do that.
How much I love you.
I'm pretty sure they are.
What episode is this? That's the signal.
Oh.
Hi everyone and welcome to episode 8 of Nights at the Round Table, at the actual round table. I'm sitting here with Rob Olsen, and today we will be discussing the book The Ruby Knight, Book 2 of the Elenium series by David Eddings. I don't know how to describe this very well without giving everything away, but essentially Sparhawk and his friends go on a quest to retrieve an item that will save his queen, and it's the only item that can save his queen. And I'll start with general impressions of the book. Rob?
Okay, well, The Ruby Knight is not a new book out there. Literally the first time I read it was like 25 years ago, or something crazy like that. Or at least it feels that long. Probably less, but it feels that long. And I remember it extremely fondly, and I could actually say I loved it quite a bit back then. I haven't read it since. And my impressions of it changed a little bit. The introduction was like exactly the way I remembered it.
The prologue, you mean?
Yeah, the prologue.
Yeah.
And the first couple chapters was exactly the way I remembered it, and I was like all into it. And then I got around to the second half of the book, and I was like, oh. And I felt the quality just went.
I have the exact reverse. I read the prologue was excellent. I loved the prologue. And then for the first few chapters, I was like, oh, the writing isn't as good as I remember it. And then I got really into the book, and it didn't matter anymore.
Oh man. Okay. Fight. No. Okay, so we both agree the prologue was really cool.
Yes.
And for those of you who have never read this book, what the prologue is essentially doing is it's setting the scene. And the first chapter is basically vintage Sparhawk.
Yeah, it's basically a recap of the first book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing about the prologue I really liked is it gave you a lot of sort of historical backstory between Sparhawk's family and the royal family. And I thought it was really lovely. It also had all of the legend, myth and legend overtones that I really, really, really love about fantasy, in how the rings he wore became red, for example.
Don't be one of those people who skips over the prologue because it doesn't matter. Vital information here, so you're reading the book, and if you haven't read the prologue, you're like, why is this important? Why is that important? Why does this dude care so much about some queen he barely even knows? Vital information. Don't be those people.
Yeah, it's... This series is the one that got me reading prologues. I never skip a prologue now because of the Elenium series, and this prologue in particular was the reason why, because I remember I read this book and I did skip the prologues for all of them, and then I went back and I reread it with the prologues, and I'm like, oh my god, the book is so much more rich now. It was just, yeah, read the prologue. It's a good prologue.
The character Sparhawk, I mean, I love this guy so much. Like,
So do I.
He's one of those guys where, it's half, you want to be him, and for me, I found a lot of similarities with the way he deals with stuff and the way I deal with stuff. And I always really identified with Sparhawk, completely. And there's this one quote, which is, my martial arts background. And Sparhawk's walking through a city, and there's some people who are basically following him. And it basically goes, he's talking about, some sort of, thug who's following him. And he's saying, and he's trained in levels of violence no footpad could match. And so he's not at all worried about coming into conflict with these people. And he's just like, if it wasn't for my mission and the need to to be stealthily, I just say, bring it, because you don't have a chance, you little fuck. And I love this about him.
I also love Sparhawk. Sparhawk was my first ever literary crush, and he's been my most enduring literary crush. Every time I open these books, I'm like, oh, Sparhawk. It's like the first love you remember fondly, and that's the way it is with the character Sparhawk for me. He's very well written. I like how his seriousness is juxtaposed against his friend Calvin, who is always mucking around and acting the goat. And it works really well. Eddings did a really good job with all the characters, right down to Sparhawk's horse. Farron is one of my favorite characters in this book. He's grumpy, he bites, he won't listen to anyone except Sparhawk, and when Sparhawk's in full armor, he's such a showboat horse, he prances. He's a brilliant character in and of himself, even though he's like just the horse.
It is the first time like they suit up in armor and they've got their lances, and you know the horse starts prancing. It's like, I'm a pretty horse, and Sparhawk's like, really horse? Seriously?
Stop it. I think, there's a lot about this series that I love a lot, including the banter. Eddings does dialogue really well. It's usually funny and natural feeling, and you get the impression that these are 3 or 10 people who've been traveling together for a while.
It was 10, yeah.
Yeah, it was 10, yeah.
One of my notes was I especially love the interplay between Talon and Sparhawk.
Yes.
Talon's, one of the younger characters, and he's basically a little thief, and he's constantly.
Basically, he is a little thief.
Yeah, well, he's constantly stealing stuff, and Sparhawk's constantly giving him grief about it, and it's not like grief like your dad's like bad. He's like, dude, just put it back.
Yeah.
Seriously, just put it back.
Really, must you?
Yeah.
Like when he stole the dagger from. And Sparhawk's talking, and then halfway through he goes, Talon, put it back. Just. Aww.
The worst part is, you're chatting with, your sovereign lord or whatever, and chat, discussion. Would you put that back? I loved it.
Yes.
Good stuff.
Done brilliantly, I do have to say.
But so it's the first half of this book. The interplay with the characters. The richness of how I love Sparhawk. All of these things are what makes this book really cool. My problem is once it started getting into like the actual adventure of the story, they're basically going to steal this gem. Retrieve this gem to free up their queen who was poisoned.
They're trying to save the world.
They're trying to save the world. But the quest itself came off feeling really Lords of the Ringy to me.
Yes, that did, yes.
Yeah.
Well, all of these fellowships go hunting for a treasure thing are all Lord of the Rings. I mean, it was Lord of the Rings is the grandfather of fantasy, so.
Well, the thing is, I read this when I was 10. And I read Lord of the Rings when I was about 13. So I read this before I read Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
So, back then, this book has a dwarf troll.
To be fair though, the dwarf troll isn't very small.
No, but
comparatively
when he falls into the chasm, it was a little bit Balrog-like, and there was.
Oh, really? Because I found that very Golem-like.
Well, the dwarf troll, as a whole, is extremely Golem-like.
But right down when he falls into the chasm, he's like, "I'm taking this with me, suckers!" Like Golem did with the ring.
Yeah. Okay.
So
I'll give you that one.
Yeah.
There's more Golem-like than
There's
Balrog.
more Golem than Balrog. There was no "you shall not pass."
The point is, there was a lot of parallels in key scenes where I was like, oh, this was not as awesome and original as I remember it to be.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. I mean, it's still a Wilson read, but you can pick the derivatives pretty easily.
There was also a lot of things that were extremely convenient.
Yeah, that's the whole way through this series, though. I think when we did the first book last year, we mentioned the same thing. Like, there's a whole lot of conveniences that felt contrived. But and the thing with Eddings though is he addresses it in prose. When dialogue between Sparhawk and Flute, or Sparhawk and Sophronia, I can't remember which one it was, where he's like, sometimes it feels like somebody's been pushing this along. What me?
Sophronia, her role as a mystic, a devotee of one of the, younger gods. So, she's really very much like, there is a plan to everything, and everything happens for a reason, and like, la 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 la. So, for her, that's one thing. But as a book as a whole, it's very convenient.
No, I agree. I agree with the convenience factor. It was. And then, if I didn't enjoy the characters so much, I would probably have written more about that. Plot conveniences. What was I saying? Yeah, the whole series is full of them. But it's relatively forgivable, I think.
Okay, it's also important to note that, the quality of the series, really falls into the realm of fast food fantasy. And as fast food fantasy, it's one of the better ones.
It is. I have so much fun reading these books that there are a lot of relatively negative things that I could say about them, but they're just so much fun that I really enjoy them. I sink into the story really easily. Although I do have to say, right at the beginning, the way that everybody is described in lists, and it's sort of dull and not great quality writing, but it's still fun.
So basically, the editor was like, "You need to intro these characters." He's like, "Fine.
Yeah, he's
this is him. This is him.
Calton
this
has
is her."
blonde hair, and he was doing this, and he was wearing this, and he was It's not spectacular, but
Okay, so back to things we like. One of the things about Sparhawk that I really, really loved is he calls everybody neighbor.
yes.
And one of the things, one of the other characters was like, why do you call everybody neighbor? Why don't you just call everybody, hey, friend? And his response was, because not everybody's necessarily my friend.
Yeah.
I don't know that yet.
Yeah, I don't know that because I don't know that yet. That's the line.
And I was like, nice! Very nice. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like Sparhawk and Kurik's relationship. Kurik is Sparhawk's squire. He trains Sparhawk from a little boy up, and he just... No spoilers, but oh my god, that friendship.
Yeah. Well, I always like the Sparhawk Colton one.
Yes, because
I'm like Sparhawk and my best friend is like Colton, so it's just a natural.
Like they play off each other really well. Like Sparhawk with the deadpan gets really angry and quite icy when he's angry. Calton, who's always like the clown, and his anger is like a flash in a pan, right? It doesn't simmer the way Sparhawk's does. It's just he gets angry, he does something about it, then he feels better. Yeah.
Whereas Sparhawk is like, I might not be able to get you now, but I will get you later.
This has been made note of, and I don't forget.
You're on my list.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Speaking of Calton, his smart arsery the whole way through the book. I giggled so much reading his lines. My favorite was when they raise the... it's when they go attack the Seeker, and Calton's like, I've had enough of this. And so he goes for the Seeker and gets knocked off his horse. And Sparhawk dismounts and goes to him, are you okay? He's like, no, I'm just lying here for fun. I'm like, that's awesome.
Public service announcement. Don't go off and try to kill random supernatural bad guy until your mystic has told you what random supernatural bad guy can do.
Yeah.
I love these public service announcements. Readers, be a better adventurer. Listen to Rob's advice. Do as I say, not as I do. Important.
Be a better adventurer.
Good to note, good to note. Well, we have to educate here at Knights of the Round Table.
Naturally. There was something that really grated on my nerves, and I only noticed it in this reading. And because I have read this book a lot. It was my favorite series, fantasy series growing up. Lord of the Rings notwithstanding, because that's everybody's favorite, basically. But I loved it so much. And then I read this line, that Ilana is no ordinary woman. And then the feminist in me went, wait a minute, what's that supposed to mean? Like an ordinary woman wouldn't be able to rule a kingdom? What the hell?
in Sparhawk's defense, that's not exact. It's taken out of context because you had somebody. He was talking to somebody who was
Worgen. He was talking to Worgen, and Worgen's was like, that's an unnatural state for a woman to rule.
Yeah.
And then Sparhawk was like, well, she's not any ordinary woman. What Sparhawk should have said was, excuse me, what's wrong with women ruling? And honestly, I only noticed it in this reading. All the other times I'm like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. But now that I'm a grown-up woman, I'm like, excuse me? What? No.
See, that's not the way I remember it.
I know. It's not the way I remembered it.
I remembered it as being the guy who he was talking to was like, oh, you know, she's a female ruler, and basically dismissing her because she was a female ruler. And Sparhawk was kind of like, she's extraordinary, okay? Not like, I didn't remember it as...
No, I have the quote here. Like, she's no ordinary woman. And I know it's not meant that way, but because... I think because people say that sort of stuff all the time, it just slips you notice until one day you're told that you can't do something because you're a woman. And then in order to do it, you have to be an extraordinary woman, which is just rubbish, in my opinion, for a lot of stuff.
Public service announcement, you should always try to be extraordinary.
Be a better adventurer.
But don't take shit about how you are if you're not extraordinary. That's what we're saying, right? Yeah, okay.
And it only jumped out at me at this reading. Most of the other time, it was like nothing. I didn't even think about it. And then this time I was like, wait a minute. That actually is kind of annoying.
It's good you pointed that out, because that's not the way I remember it, and
yeah.
I didn't notice, and my bad.
It's okay. I mean, most people wouldn't. It's just because, I have been told before that I can't do stuff because I'm a woman, and it really annoys me.
Yeah. Also, one other cool thing about this book, a lot of the plot is church related.
Yeah.
There's a lot of religiosity in this book, and the main characters are all, knights of the church.
More or less.
There's very little push religion on the reader,
Yeah.
And that I found was very well done.
Yeah, what I really liked about it is how in the Knights of the Church, it's more or less the church that you imagine. There's only one God, and recognition of all other gods is utter heresy, and the church doesn't recognize other gods. But in this universe, those other gods still exist, whether the church likes it or not.
And the church knights are learning dirty little sneaky magic tricks as part of their training.
As part of their training, which they shouldn't be able to do because that's heresy. But, the church turns a blind eye to the Styric arts. Yeah, I did like that. Like, there is a lot of religiosity, but it's not cramming any one ideology down your throat. I really appreciated that. Especially when Calton... this was from the first book, but Calton said, God requests my sword. What I do with me is... the rest of the time is up to me when he goes chasing after skirts. I just found that hilarious. I really like the variety of characters in this. All the knights have their own personalities. For most of them, they're relatively indistinct, except Sparhawk being the brooding one, Calton being the clown. The one that stands out most would be Bevia, who is an innocent little flower who gets affronted quite frequently by what the rest of the knights get up to. And it makes for fun play. Although, outside of Sparhawk, my favorite knight would be Ulath.
Yeah, Ulath is their version of a Norseman knight.
Yeah, Norse knight. Chainmail instead of armor because you can't swim in armor.
Ogre horn helmet.
Yeah. Doesn't speak much. Talks about braining people a lot.
At one point, one of the other characters was giving him crap because there was some sort of, they were looking into the history of something to track down some information, and there was a gap in his people's historical records, and he's like, dude, we write in runes.
Yeah.
takes a while. It's long.
So-
Sometimes things get missed. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. I enjoyed that.
Yes, yeah, very much. Okay, so if you were to sum up and give this out of 5 stars, what would you do?
If I had not reread the book, if I'd just gone by memory, I would have been like, this book's a 4. Rereading the book, it's a 3. So I'll give it a 3.5 due to nostalgia reasons. It's 3.25.
3.25?
Yeah, that's a bit
Just
a bit generous.
really annoyed Tom. He's giving you the dirtiest look right now.
It's okay.
I am giving this book a solid 3.5 because it was a fun read. Reading skill is not high in this, so this is suitable for quite young kids. Nothing really awful that might upset them happens in the book, so yeah. For young audiences, it's perfect. I know a lot of this is nostalgia talking, but it's still a really fun read. I still giggle at the lines that Eddings delivers, and I still think that the story, although quite derivative, is fun and exciting enough to keep you reading. So yeah, a solid 3.5. I really enjoy this series a lot. Okay, did you want to pick the next book then?
Uh-oh. She's trusting me with this. We're doomed. Because there's nobody else here. Smartass. Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson.
Okay. For the record, Steven Erikson is my favorite author right now, so I'm going to fangirl all over this book. Gardens of the Moon, it's book 1 of the Malice and Book of the Fallen series, and I happen to think it's brilliant. So that's what we'll be reading in a fortnight. If you would like to join in the conversation, do leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can also find Silver Stag Studios on Facebook and Twitter at Silver Stag Studio, and at facebook.com/Silverstag Entertainment.
Oh, and we have also been requested that we add in our Twittery handles at Geek Inked.
Rob, and you can find me at SM Carrière. Thanks very much, and have a lovely afternoon, and whatever time of the day it is. Bye!
How very deist of you.
I'm timist.